Good evening, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I see a lot of old friends and a lot of new ones that are joining us. Tonight is going to be a very, very special night for us. We have Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, who will be with us at the very beginning of our Zoom meeting. So welcome, everybody. And again, thank you for joining us. My name is Andrea Miller. I'm the founding board member of Center for Common Ground. And again, I am so very glad that you were able to join us. Before we get started with all of our special guests, want to give my team a little bit of an update on where we are right now. Center for Common Ground is a nonprofit, and the special work that we do is during election season, we make sure that the I'm going to say forgotten and left out voters get contacted so that they will know where to vote, what their options are for voting. So right now, we currently are doing phone banking and texting into 3 states that have primaries in May. North Carolina has a primary on May 17th. And then Georgia and Alabama have primaries the following Tuesday on May 24th. Gabe, do you want to unmute for a moment and quickly talk about what phone banks are running and if people need training, where they can get training?
Sure, yeah, we're running phone banks into North Carolina and we added Georgia last week. So we're calling voters in advance of when early voting begins for both states. And we're calling voters of all ages, black voters of all ages in North Carolina, both in Mecklenburg County and in Greensboro, the city of Greensboro. And then in Georgia, we're doing Fulton County, which is, the major county that has Atlanta. So yeah, early voting locations are posted, and we have guided phone banks Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday every week. So if you head on over to centerforcommonground.org and click on our phone bank page, Justin just put that link in the chat. You'll be able to sign up for a guided phone bank, and you'll also be able to ask any questions. And watch a training video. You can make calls on your own time, so you don't have to wait for one of these guided phone banks if you're a go-getter yourself. And yeah, so they're ready, they're up, and they'll be up and running, from now until Election Day, and we'll always have a phone bank up from now at least until July, because there's always going to be some state where something's going on.
Thanks, Gabe. Carrie, do you want to give us a quick update on what's going on with postcards?
Sure. We've got Alabama, North Carolina, and Georgia all going simultaneously. And it's really easy to get involved. And the information you need is on our website. And I'll put the link up in a minute on the postcard page. And there is a list of regional coordinators from all over the country. So you can find your closest organizer and get all oriented and set up. And there are a lot of resources in the website too, where to order postcards and all that. And the deadlines are going to be basically late in April for Georgia and North Carolina, but we probably will extend Georgia into early May. And Alabama, mail by dates May 1st to 12th.
All right, great. Thanks so very much, Carrie. I'm working on texting and we are finalizing the scripts right now as we speak. So there is a very good chance that by this weekend, texting will be up and running. And I will update the texting page on our website when we get final approval from the local partners on the scripts. All of the texting that we do is from or through our relational organizing tool, Outreach Circle. So we would love to have you come and text with us. This is a primary, so we are going to do somewhat limited texting. We are specifically texting Black voters who did not vote in 2020. So we're really encouraging people to turn out and vote in the primary election, because what we've seen in the past is if we can get voters to go out and vote in the primary, we have an 80 to 85% chance of getting them to vote in the general. So we want this to be an absolutely great midterm election. So that's our update. And what I'm going to do now, I'm excited since the Congresswoman is here. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being a little bit early. So it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney of it was the 12th District of New York with redistricting. I know some people's district numbers have shuffled around. So we are absolutely thrilled. Last week, we shattered another glass ceiling. The Senate confirmed our very first African-American Supreme Court justice. Representative Maloney knows a lot about shattering glass ceilings. She went into Congress in 1992 and currently is the first woman to chair the Oversight Committee. And they are going to be tasked with some amazing work this cycle. She also chairs the joint economic committee, the joint committees. I'm going a little sketchy on that. She is a progressive fighter. She has been in the trenches for women and all people who really, really, really need a champion in Congress. So Congresswoman Maloney, thank you so very much for joining us tonight. And she's going to talk about something I've been working on for, I think I figured it out, 56 years, the Equal Rights Amendment, and possibly a couple of other topics. So I'm going to get out of the way. And Congresswoman, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I'm delighted to join the Center for Common Ground. And first of all, I want to thank you for speaking so positively about the midterm elections. It really annoys me when people talk about, we may lose and blah, 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 blah. There is so much we should be proud of with the American Rescue Plan, which brought over $100 billion to the city I represent, and the first infrastructure bill, comprehensive infrastructure bill that we've had since I've been in Congress. We just passed my reform bill for the Postal Service, and President Biden had a big sort of bill signing on it. And we're working now on the Competes Act to combat China and some of our competition over trade and other areas, and doing a scaled back bill with the Build Back Better. So these are all major advancements, and President Biden has created more jobs than the 1960s. So we have a lot to be very proud of coming out of a COVID and fighting there. I'm so glad you're going to talk about the Equal Rights Amendment. It's a critically important. That is my #1 priority. And I am very honored to join you this evening and to work side by side with you in that fight. I'm delighted to see Kate Kelly is here with us. I miss her. She recently left my staff to devote her time to her new book about the Equal Rights Amendment. And I'm so happy to see you. We miss you, Kate. And Lisa Mickens and Katie Hornig have done extraordinary work through Vote Equality US, which is taking a movement that started in Virginia across the country to make it the case for gender equality for all. And importantly, they are inspiring a new generation of ERA activists. It was particularly gratifying to see the momentum that has built behind the ERA in recent years after decades of stalemate due to extraordinary leadership in the states, particularly Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia. They all ratified it. The ERA has met the constitutional requirement of 38 states for ratification. In 2019, the ERA was a winning electoral issue in the races for the Virginia state legislature, which brought many Democrats to Congress and gave us a Democratic majority and allowed Virginia to become the 38th and final state necessary to ratify for the amendment. According to Section 3 of the ERA, the implementation period is 2 years from that vote of the last ratified state, which was in January 2020. So the 2 years are almost up. The ERA is the 28th Amendment, according to the requirements laid out in Article 5 of the Constitution. They had 2 requirements: get 2/3 of Congress to vote for it, get it ratified by 2/3 states. Well, we met them. And then the next step was to have the archivist really certify it, and he is refusing so far to do that. We've been pushing hard in Congress to break through the logjam that is preventing the recognition of the ERA. I've introduced it 13 times since I've been in Congress, and my friend Jackie Spear has championed a resolution to eliminate the time limit that Congress passed in 1972. And many legal scholars say it was not binding. It wasn't part of the resolution. It was just in the preamble, and just, get over it. Let's ratify and go for it. Her resolution has passed the House twice, but is stalled in the Senate. Last month, in honor of International Women's Day, along with Congresswoman Spear, we together and other colleagues urged Senate Majority Leader Schumer to bring this critical legislation up for a vote on the Senate floor. We should see where people stand. And those people who want to vote against it, let's just take it out as you are in an election. This action would go a long way toward removing any doubt about the validity of the ERA. Let's put it to the floor. Let's have a vote. And as chair of the Oversight Committee, with the help of Kate, we held an historic hearing last year on the importance of the ERA and charting a path forward to ensure that the ERA is recognized. It had been decades since the last congressional hearing. I believe it was 40 years since a congressional hearing on the ERA had occurred. So elections have a difference, and who's the chair has a difference. And we see that in attention from Congress on the ERA. It's clear that the need for the ERA remains, and we see that in too many circumstances. Gender discrimination persists when it comes to violence against women, which we just reauthorized. The gender pay gap, which has been the same for 30 years. And you're always going to have it, in my opinion, until you have the ERA and can enforce it. Once you have the ERA, you can enforce it. The pregnancy discrimination, abortion rights. I am amazed at the loss and possible loss that may happen to abortion rights. And certainly the passing the ERA is going to help us with abortion rights and the LGBTQ plus equality. The only right for women mentioned in the Constitution is the right to vote. It took women 100 years to ratify the 19th Amendment. And I know that we're going to pass it and ratify it because the fight that we have is not as difficult as what they faced. Alice Paul was a relative of my late husband, and she was put in prison and in a mental institution because she believed women should have the right to vote, force-fed, and just terrible conditions that they had to overcome. So we have a fight on our hands, but it's nothing like the fight that they had. The ERA will provide a firm foundation for the challenges to gender discrimination in federal court, which we usually lose because they will argue that protecting women from discrimination is not in the Constitution, and legal force between the federal and state legislation aimed at combating discrimination. Without the ERA, these efforts are not enforceable. This leaves us vulnerable to whoever is in power. And our equality should not depend on who controls Congress or the presidency or sits on the Supreme Court. Discrimination against women and all marginalized genders must be expressly prohibited in the Constitution. Although the roadblocks are disappointing, there are reasons to be optimistic that the ERA will finally be recognized as part of the Constitution. President Biden has made statements in support of it and strongly calling on for congressional action. To that end, I was proud to co-lead a House resolution led by Congresswoman Spear that affirms that the ERA has been duly ratified. Currently, 164 of our House colleagues have joined us in supporting this resolution, and the coalition is building. And over this last year, I've released analysis by prominent constitutional and legal scholars that rebuke the flawed Office of Legal Counsel memo issued during the Trump administration that declared the ERA to be dead. We have urged over and over for the Biden administration to recall that, bring it, just remove it. But they have not done so far. They have revisited that memo, and while it was not rescinded as we had hoped, it was passed by Trump and his cronies. So why not just rescind it and put in the Biden memo, which would call for the ratification? It has called its original questions into, they've doubted it, they've questioned it, they've said they're for the ERA, but they haven't removed the memo, which they should. Congress, not the executive branch, controls the process of amending the Constitution. And I continue to urge the archivist of the US to carry out his duties to certify the ERA as the 28th Amendment to the Constitution. And I have a letter from him when he first got appointed. I wrote him, we talked about the ERA. He wrote me back and said, oh yeah, he supports it. Can't wait to certify it. And yet he has held it up, saying that he has to follow the Trump memo. And there truly is power in numbers. So the more of us who are engaged in this issue, the more successful we'll be in keeping it at the forefront of the national conversation. The path toward constitutional equality has been winding and, of course, slower than supporters would like. But the work must continue until equality for all of us is finally guaranteed in the US Constitution. The ERA is a vital tool to strengthen our democracy. Discrimination of any kind stifles an individual's ability to realize their full potential as a member of our society. And our nation's most important document should firmly say that equality for all is a shared value and one that we intend to live by. I want to thank you for being here, for inviting me to speak on what I think is a truly important issue. We need to do more for gender equality in this country, and finally putting Equal Rights Amendment in the Constitution would achieve it. I look forward to answering your questions and joining your discussion. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so very much, Congresswoman. Josie, I believe you have the questions.
Yes, thank you again, Congresswoman Maloney, for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know things in New York are very crazy right now. One of the first questions I had, you've kind of answered, and folks in the chat have been addressing this as well, but I would like it if you could speak a little bit more to that, and that is why the ERA has not been published by the National Archives yet, and also that the archivist seems to be retiring this month. So if you could just speak a little more to that and what that means for the ERA.
Well, the archivist was appointed by President Obama. And I was very hopeful when we met with him. He said he was for the ERA. But when we passed it in Nevada and we were passing it in Virginia, I asked for another meeting. And he came to my office and he said that he had written the Justice Department and asked them what he should do when the ERA comes to him. Now, the law clearly states the process. Constitution says in Article 5, you meet the two requirements that I mentioned, get it ratified, pass both houses with 2/3 majority. Well, we did that. And then it says the document should be certified by the archivist. Instead of doing what the Constitution said and what the law said, he decides that he's going to write the Trump administration's Department of Justice and ask for guidance. Well, you know the kind of guidance you're going to get from the Trump administration. Really, they're chipping away. They're not chipping away at women's rights. They're bulldozing them into the ground. They are about in his court to repeal Roe v. Wade, which I thought was settled law when I was your age. I never thought we would still be fighting that. So he has decided that he is not going to certify it because of the erroneous memo that was written by it is a political document, memo written by the Trump administration. So, we now have a new team in town, the Democratic team that is pro-ERA. They should remove the Trump arbitrary memo and place another one in there. So it's not just the archivist, it really is the President of the United States and everybody working with him. He says he's with us, but he could take steps that really showed he was with us. Now, I like the president. I am thrilled that we have a Democratic president that has allowed us to do many things that we were not able to do before and make many strides in areas for the country. But this is a problem here. He is leaving. He's leaving next week. And then that will allow our President Biden to make an appointment to the archivist. And we've got to, it's just, we've got to push that a good person that is pro-ERA goes into that vital position. But we also need that memo removed. Now, we have several court cases that are winding through the courts. So it may get to the Supreme Court. We've got to get that negative document out of the paperwork. And the statements from the constitutional scholars and others, some from Columbia, some from Harvard, are very recognized and respected, who say that it should be ratified. So the archivist is continuing to hold off on fulfilling his duties, which is basically a secretarial job because of the Trump memo. And the Biden administration has questioned it, but they haven't revoked it, which we need. And Nevada and Illinois have also brought a lawsuit against the archivist, which is ongoing. And I continue to call on the administration to allow the certification of the AR to go forward and for the Senate to pass. We have constitutional scholars that say we don't have to remove the time limit, but we put in a resolution to eliminate it. So that's something else the Senate could do. And these steps would be instrumental in settling an injustice that has persisted for a long time. There can be no deadline when it comes to equality, and we should not have to wait any longer to realize it. Now, fundamentally, these issues will go out to the elections that you were talking about. Personally, I'd like to know where every candidate running for the Senate stands on the ERA. So I would like the president of the Senate, Chuck Schumer from New York, to have a vote on it so we know where we stand. Let's take it out to the battlefield and hold people accountable. And all these candidates that are running for the Senate, we have to get them on record on how they stand for the ERA. I would say that it's very difficult. Everybody says they're for it when I talk to them. Yeah, I'm for it, I'm for it, I'm for it. Well, then I say, well, you put your name on the bill. And they say, oh, no, listen, no, not right now. Well, they're not for it. So I'd like to know where people stand. We forced a vote in the House, so we know where people stand. And this issue can be taken into to the voters directly. And I think that's what we have to do. All I can say is that we're having a lot of difficulty, but our challenges are far less than what our sisters, our ancestors faced when they fought for the right to vote. And they thought that with the right to vote would come all power to get other rights, but we have to use that vote and hold people accountable.
Absolutely. We have to make sure that the people that we elect to represent us in office are still there to represent our interests. You kind of spoke, thank you, spoke a little bit about some of the things that we as voters should be doing to make our voices heard and make sure that the ERA is ratified. I guess one thing, for example, would be calling the White House hotline, asking the president to remove this outrageous memo and make sure that whoever the next archivist is, that they are a supporter of the ERA. Are there any other things that we can do today, tomorrow to make sure that the ERA does become, it's officially acknowledged?
A democracy literally goes back to the people. I would like to see a vote in the Senate on the ERA, and then take this out to the battlefield. And hopefully the women and like-minded men will hold them accountable with their vote. If they can't even vote for women's equality, I mean, that should be like having a cup of Coke. It should not be a hard lift. And I think that ultimately it goes to the voters. And I would like a vote on it so we know where we stand. And that's basically what they did in Virginia. They had a bitter fight in Virginia for years, and they basically took it out to the voters. They did a very well organized campaign. I went there several times. They had buses, ERA buses, going around the state and talking to everybody. But they literally voted some of these people out that weren't for the ERA and got people in that supported it. That's basically holding them accountable. I would like to bring the fight into the election.
Absolutely.
In addition to every other thing we're doing.
Yeah, no, but that's the most important thing, right? We have to keep people accountable and have them on record for being for or against women's rights and equality under the law. I don't know when your stop is, but those are the two questions that we actually had. I know you're very busy, but thank you again for being here. This was inspiring and exciting. For all the folks that are on the call tonight, they will get some follow-ups on all the things that they can do to create some good trouble around the ERA.
That's what we need, a lot of good trouble. I do have other meetings, and I have a very tough re-election campaign myself, a primary coming up. So I'm going to get back to work, and I'm so glad you're doing it. And it's good to see Democrats talking positively about winning the midterms. We did much better in redistricting than we expected. And many of the people, they say, well, 30 people, resigned or not running again. And if you look at their districts, they're sort of predetermined. I mean, Jackie Spears regrettably is leaving Congress, but her district will elect a Democrat. So you know that a lot of these people that are Democrats are going to be replacing them. I think we can win, and on our record we can win. And we need to get out there and get the message out like you're doing with these phone calls into these battleground states. So I want to thank you for what you're doing. Elections have consequences. And if we want to pass the ERA, we've got to surgically remove those that are opposed to us and replace them with people who believe in equality of opportunity and rights. With that, I'm signing off. There is, listen, I spend a lot of time in Congress. They're constantly trying to roll back what we've already achieved. We're chipping away at Title IX, at Title VII, overturning Roe v. Wade. If you had the Equal Rights Amendment, they wouldn't be able to do it. And then we could push forward instead of playing defensive and trying to protect the rights that we've already worked so hard and obtained. I want to thank you. And equality, when women succeed, the country succeeds. So it's important for us to do that. Thank you. And I'll get on your next one. But right now, I've got to get back to work. Bye-bye. Great to see you, Kate, Kelly, and others. And nice to meet new friends. Great. Thank you.
Congresswoman.
Take care. Oh, that was wonderful and fun and inspiring. I want to bring up our Center for Common Ground board member, Katie Hornung, and Katie will be introducing our next guest. And this gives me really, really, really great pleasure. I tell people I've been working on the Equal Rights Amendment for 56 years. So that's, a very, very long time. And it was delightful to have Katie step up. And now we are looking at the next generation and even the generation after. So Katie, take it away.
Thank you, Andrea. I really appreciate you putting this together tonight. And I love everything Congresswoman Maloney had to say. We love to say done, but not published. We have met the hurdle. It's just not been published. And of course, we know it's generally men that are the ones not publishing this. So we have published a pocket constitution with the 28th Amendment in it. I think Justin threw that into the chat. That gave me a little smidge of an idea or kind of an empathy on what it takes to write a book. And all of our content was pretty much already written, and it was a lot of work to edit and edit and edit again. And so it is my great pleasure tonight to introduce Kate Kelly, who has taken her tremendous passion for gender equality, constitutional gender equality. And the very best thing about Kate Kelly is sometimes you have very cerebral authors who are terrible speakers, but Kate Kelly is an awesome speaker. So tonight you're going to really enjoy this. This is her book. I highly recommend it for everyone. And I'm going to plug and brag on Kate because Kate will probably be more modest than to do that. So I like to brag on all the people who are amazing. Part of being amazing is not being a huge ego. And so then you need your friends to brag on you. So it is a full color book. It is super fun. And it is laid out in a way that is attractive. This is not your mother's history book. This is a really fun one. So anyway, Kate, I really look forward to you telling everybody what was on your heart in making this book and the stories that you're telling. And thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. So excited that you're all here. It's incredible to see so many people on a Zoom event on a Thursday night wanting to know about elections and constitutional equality. And you're my kind of people, nerds, super nerds who care about equality in our country. So excited to be here. I just want to say, Congresswoman Maloney is one of the people that I mentioned in the book. She has been a long time just tireless advocate for the ERA, and there aren't many of those up on the Hill. So I loved working for her, and I loved hearing from her tonight because it's incredibly important to have like a constant drumbeat, always, ERA until we get it done. And so I also wanted to point out another person who's mentioned in the book who you may recognize in the final. So the book, like Katie said, the book goes from before the Constitution was written to the modern day. So there are 12 chapters. And in each chapter, it features a different woman or queer person. And like I said, it goes all the way to the modern day. So in the final chapter of the book, there is an excerpt about Andrea Miller, your illustrious Center for Common Ground leader. So spoiler alert, Andrea is also in the book as a person who has fought for the ERA and is part of both its history and its future and the present. So really, really thrilled to talk about her in the book as well. I'll say that I want to stick to the question. I'm a lawyer, so I want to stick to the question asked of me by Katie, which is kind of the impetus for writing the book. If you're on this Zoom tonight and you were born after 1982, or you were a young child in 1982, you probably haven't heard of the ERA, or at least most of your friends haven't. You guys might be super nerds, so you've probably heard of it, but you might not talk about it in your social circles or see it on your social media for the most part. And the reason that is in 1982, I like to say the ERA stalled out. The ERA met a deadline, as Congresswoman Maloney pointed out. The deadline was arbitrary and inserted in the proposing clause, and we can get into the nitty gritty if people have really specific questions about the ERA. But the deadline came and went. In 1979, it was extended to 1982, and then 1982, a lot of ERA advocates and most of the country accepted defeat on the Equal Rights Amendment. And so in the interim decades, only a very tiny handful of people kept the fight alive, kept the energy up, would not accept defeat. Some of those people are on the call tonight: Eileen Davis, Andrea Miller, and others who just refused to give up on the ERA. So thank God for all of those activists. But the ERA sort of stalled out in this period that's kind of sometimes referred to as the doldrums. But in 2017, in the final chapter of the book, highlights Senator Pat Spearman in Nevada, who resurrected the ERAs. Congresswoman Maloney talked about why elections matter. Well, in Nevada, they had for the first time ever, a female majority legislature, and a Black queer military veteran preacher named Senator Pat Spearman brought back the ERA and got it ratified in 2017. This was a really groundswell and just like watershed movement for the ERA, because for all those decades between 1982 and 2017, people thought, oh, it's dead, it's not going to happen. And then all of a sudden in 2017, a new state ratified. And so everyone was like, it's possible. It's not only conceivable, it's possible. And many of you are from Virginia, obviously, know the rest of that story. So Nevada ratified in 2017, Illinois ratified in 2018, and Virginia ratified in 2020. And so we are now at a point, like the Congresswoman said, where the ERA is the 28th Amendment. Hooray, we did it. Congratulations, us. The only problem is that has not been recognized. And so really that's, like Katie said, we did it, but it hasn't been finalized or recognized. There's just like one final step that it has to be recognized by the federal government and published in the National Register. And that hasn't happened yet. So voter equality has printed out these handy pocket constitutions. So we have the 28th Amendment in the pocket constitution, but the National Archives has not. So we still need the federal government to recognize the ERA as what it is, the 28th Amendment, and then publish that. And so every kid who gets a pocket constitution knows that the 28th Amendment is in there. It needs to be recognized. There can be a beautiful display of the National Archives once they go ahead and certify and publish. But I think part of the book and part of the reason I wrote the book, and also it's illustrated, like Katie pointed out, is it's not a constitutional legal text. It's not heavy. It's not, it's really it's a tribute to the women and the people who have brought the ERA forward. It's colorful, literally. It's filled with color, but it's also filled with colorful stories about these people and who they were and their girlhoods and their talents and also some of their weaknesses. And I'm happy to talk about any of that if people have questions. But that's who the book is for. The movement that's come before us and the movement forward. The last page of the book is a chart about how people can get involved in the fight for the ERA and how you can get involved. And as you'll see, Vote Equality is one of the groups that I mentioned in the book for people to join. So there's Vote Equality, there's ERA Coalition, and then there's also Generation Ratify, which is specifically for teenagers, young people, to get involved in the fight for the ERA, because we are all still part of this movement. We are all still fighting until we get it. And once we get it, we'll be fighting to make it what we want it to be. So I'll leave it there unless other folks have questions.
Well, thank you, Kate. Really appreciate that. I didn't see any questions pop up, but we're gonna cut to Liza for a little bit. And if they do, we can come on back and both of you can be on together. So if anybody has questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat and we'll come back. Let's see here. And so we also have tonight, let's see here. Trying to get Liza on here, sorry. There we go. We also have tonight our spokeswoman with Vote Equality, and Liza Mickens has been working with us since she was in college, actually, like 2018, I think. And so she is now fledged out of the nest in more ways than one. She's now a mortgage holder, has a real job, all the things. And she's here tonight to talk to us a little bit about what Vote Equality is doing and how we are planning to take the message to some key states and do all of our fun. You know, we're all about the joyous ruckus, and without that joyous ruckus, I do fear that all those ratifications will be wasted. And so, Liza, if you can please do us proud and let everybody know all the fun that can be had.
Absolutely. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you for also being my introduction to the ERA. Like Kate said, a lot of people born after a certain year had no idea on this issue and really wasn't discussed in school. It wasn't discussed around the dinner table. And my introduction for the ERA did come in college. And a lot of my classmates also were on a learning curve. But that is really the beauty of this movement, is that we are really bringing in the next generation, because we have to be a continuation of the work that our ancestors began. I'm the great-great-granddaughter of Maggie Lena Walker, and I'm very proud to continue her legacy of gender equality. So coming in and working with Vote Equality, like Katie said, it is a joyous ruckus. And we just actually launched our campaign and our event called Artists for ERA, which reimagines the artwork of the Equal Rights Amendment. A lot of people know the iconic green buttons with ERA yes, but now is the time to see new work that reflects all of the different individuals in this country. And it was super important for us to choose an inclusive, diverse group of artists to really be representative of this movement and of this continuation. Another thing that we are really proud to continue is the RVG tours. So during the last election, we actually did a bus tour in Georgia and other southern states to get out the vote that was in a lot of different areas where voter suppression was a large issue and still is a large issue. And so we are excited to get back on the road and pair that with our Artists for ERA campaign. So if you have an institution in mind and you would love to see this event come to a place near you, reach out to us. We would love to see this event travel, and we would love to see it in spaces that mean the most to you. This is not, this is not just the issues of the past. And so my generation really are the torchbearers of a lot of different issues. And I think that because we've recognized the issues that have been put on our shoulders, we don't want to continue that for another generation. So it's just really incredible to see this group continue a joyful ruckus, to really continue to bring awareness around these issues, but more than anything, to bring action. So thanks so much for having us here tonight, and I will turn it back over.
All right. Oh, sorry. Beginner there with the no video on. So I think one thing in particular to let everybody know about with the Artists for ERA. So we have picked a few states. We narrowed down 10 key states for our team to work on. And in particular, you know, it always depends on funding, and it also depends on volunteer hours. You know, we are a very, you know, grassrootsy, I call us like part corporate branding and people with all kinds of amazing skills, and then part gritty street team. And so we are for sure going to be taking the RVG down into Georgia and North Carolina. Last time around, we were focused on Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. This time around, it'll probably be a lot of focus in North Carolina, Georgia, and then a dip over to Florida, because Florida is in our top 10 states and South Carolina wasn't in that grouping. And then Nevada has the Equal Rights Amendment on their ballot for the voters this time around. And because they're going to be voting on it, we do not want to have any losses. We want to have a big, powerful win. They have beautiful, inclusive language that Pat Spearman, senator, or I guess now she's running to be mayor of part of Las Vegas, North Las Vegas or something. But Pat Spearman has really rallied the troops and in a very beautiful bipartisan way, gotten very inclusive language proposed to be added to Nevada. And so for one of our things is that inclusive language is even bigger and broader than what the very simple language of the 28th Amendment modeled after the 19th Amendment is. And so we don't want to see a loss with that. We want to see a really big win. So we're going to have a second vehicle that'll be out in Arizona and Nevada. I think that the anti-equality crowd probably is going to try to bring some power into Nevada, but there were a lot of Republican senators, state senators in Nevada that did vote for that. So hopefully, crossing our fingers that this will be a good and easy win, but it's important that we not have any losses as we're trying to make sure that this gets published. So that's kind of where we are on the vehicles side of things. And on the Artists for ERA side of things, we're planning to get it into HBCUs, into community colleges, into the more traditional four-year schools, the law schools, hosting it at various events. For those of you who may be headed to the NOW conference in Chicago, that is underway to have the full collection there as one of the things that you can do during the NOW conference. So we are, you know, we're working to build that joyous ruckus. We really think that we need to be inviting people in with, like Liza said, beautiful imagery and inclusive imagery, updated imagery, and really reaching out to that next generation. Whenever we worked in Virginia, we worked at all of those local schools, really trying to bring people to the issue and to make it theirs. I will say in particular, the LGBT plus inclusivity of the ERA because of the Bostock decision, and maybe Kate will pop in here and give us a little, the ERA has always been gay. But with the Bostock decision in particular, and also if you listen and talk to anybody under the age of 25, this is their key thing. So let me add Kate back in.
We have a few questions on the chat as well that we can go through if we want to do that, or if you want to talk about why the ERA has always been gay first. I think that'd be fun too.
My favorite topic. I'm happy to talk about that. I've written an entire series in the Advocate magazine called The ERA is Queer. If anyone wants to check that out, most recently, the most recent piece was last week. So check that out. And I talk about the Bostock decision, et cetera. But in short, the ERA has always been queer because it has always been promulgated by queer people. And a lot of those I talk about in the book. So Polly Murray is one of them. Polly Murray, transgender legal savant and pioneer, incredible person, Episcopal priest, just really a complete light for her entire generation and for ours. So Polly Murray was an advocate of the ERA, spoke in support of it in Congress. Barbara Jordan was a lesbian, first Black woman elected to Congress from the South ever, also spoke in favor of the ERA in Congress and was one of its biggest advocates in Congress in the 1970s. Like I said, Pat Spearman is the one who in Nevada resurrected the ERA. Pat Spearman is a lesbian as well. So we're just everywhere getting it done and always have been.
I love that. So the first question that I had further up on the chat was from Lori, which is, so much of the women's movement has been critical of excluding Black Southern suffragists to make the ERA more palatable to Southern women, white women. Part of your book speaks to and addresses these actions of so many groups and identities. Can you speak a bit to where we are now on the state of community and inclusion compared to then?
Yeah, so I talk in the book specifically about Alice Paul. Spoiler alert, Alice Paul was very racist. She did a lot of important things and also some really devastating things for the movement that shaped it in a very negative way. And by negative, again, I mean racist. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that and also talk about how we can make different choices, since that was a choice that she made, and it was a wrong choice. So I think sometimes when we talk about racism in the movement, we're like, oh, it's just how it was back then. And that's not true. There were many in the suffrage movement specifically who advocated for the inclusion of all women, Black women specifically, Native women specifically. There were advocates for Native women in the suffrage community, but those voices were silenced. So again, I think it's important to acknowledge it was an intentional choice and that we have to make different choices. So that's what I talk about in the book. And then the state of today, I mean, again, it's how it always has been. The people on the margins and the most marginalized have been the ones fighting the hardest for the ERA, because we have the most to gain. And that's true today in every state where the ERA has been resurrected, Nevada, Illinois, and also in Virginia. As y'all know, the chief co-sponsors in both the Senate and the House of Delegates in Virginia were Black women. And like I said, in Nevada was Black women, in Illinois, Black women were involved, like Lieutenant Governor Stratton, who's now Lieutenant Governor. And so I think it's important just to acknowledge it, it's just as easy as acknowledging reality, which is that women of color are on the forefront of the ERA in every state where it is currently being brought back to life.
Wonderful, thank you. Just looking at the time, let's see, do you think we could do maybe 2 more questions? Does that work for folks? One, you kind of responded to this in the chat, but this was, please talk about how the ERA can save Roe and perhaps even expand access to abortion. And also a bit more about what Biden can do or why he hasn't directed the archivist to publish the ERA now.
Great questions, both of them. And I'll be brief and then also include some links in the chat so folks can find more information. I included a link I wrote in Oprah magazine about the ERA and abortion and trans rights specifically. The really 20-second version of how it could save Roe. And by save Roe, I of course mean abortion access in this country, is that the ERA will create an entirely new right in the Constitution that does not exist today. The reason that we have abortion access as a constitutional right is it's called it is under what's called a substantive due process right. This right is privacy. And so that right was created in 1965 in the Griswold case to give people access to contraceptives. That is just brutally been stripped away since the Roe versus Wade decision was made in 1973. And we have basically scraps left of what that originally was. And those scraps that we have are due to be completely demolished in June. And so we need we just need to change the Constitution. They're going to dwindle and dwindle and dwindle and dwindle until we have nothing left under privacy. And that does not only include Roe versus Wade, it also includes Lawrence, which is legal same-sex relationships. It includes Obergefell, which is same-sex marriage. It includes Loving versus Virginia. It includes a lot of things that people are not yet aware yet. Yes, we're going to lose Roe, but we're also going to lose a lot more. Their vision is much bolder and broader. And so we we need to change the Constitution in order to create a brand new right, and so that they cannot say that that right does not exist in the literal text of the Constitution. And I go more into that in the piece. And then the second question about why Biden hasn't just instructed the archivist to do this. Great question. Wish I knew. Wish I could chat with him. I think part of the reason has to do with something that everyone on this call can help with, which is the noise around it. There are a tiny handful of very dedicated people who care about the ERA more than anything, many of whom are on this call already, but that's small. So when you don't hear about it constantly, when people aren't calling into the White House, when people aren't calling their senators, when people are not freaking out, 501, we got a lot of fires to put out in our democracy. And like the ERA is not a 5-alarm fire for most people and most elected officials. And until it is a 5-alarm fire, it's going to be weighed on a scale. And the scale is like 12 people who actually care about the ERA versus like, a lot of potential trouble and like constitutional kerfuffle and like maybe being overruled in the Supreme Court. Like, the scales need to be tipped and more people need to care about the ERA. When Congress voted to extend the deadline, and I'll end with this, when Congress voted to extend the deadline in 1979, over 100,000 people marched in person in Washington, D.C. to extend the ERA deadline. That means 100,000 people came to D.C. specifically riled up about the Equal Rights Amendment. And until we have, like Katie calls it, a joyful ruckus, until there is a ruckus about the ERA on a national scale, it's not going to tip the scale.
Yeah. Terry was there. That's awesome. All right, well, it is actually 9 p.m. Andrea, I don't know if you want to wrap things up, or Katie, but make sure everybody goes and buys Kate's book. I'm going to go do that myself. Thank you, everybody, all our wonderful guest speakers for being here this evening.
And I'm going to echo that. Thank you, Josie. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Liza. Thank you, Katie. And what the heck, since you're voting equality, Katie, I'm going to let you close us out tonight.
Oh, well, thank you very much for that opportunity. I guess what I am going to ask of every person on this call is that you consider what you can do in your personal life on this. This is not a moment to hope that somebody else saves this. This is a moment for all of us to take a step forward into the fray and just make that joyful ruckus in whatever way it is comfortable for you. Just get started. On May 1st, we're going to be launching on the voteequality.us website. We're going to launch our Take Action menu, and it's going to have 6 items. It's going to have listen, watch, read, and then do, build, vote. And basically, like, get yourself knowledgeable and then go get started. And there will be so many choices. The biggest thing we love to do is set people free and empower them and let it go in places we didn't even imagine it going, places we didn't even know we had any friends there. And then they do amazing things. So please consider getting involved, doing something bigger, go bigger than you are comfortable with. I am doing things today that I never imagined myself doing 5 years ago. And we all have this power inside of us. We are the heroes in this moment, and we need to come together and make this happen. So thank you, everybody, for showing up tonight. And thank you, Kate and Liza and Congresswoman Maloney and Andrea and Josie, for all of your organizing. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.